Hi everyone, I'm Scott Milner. I'm a board-certified family law lawyer from Austin, Texas with over 20 years of experience litigating cases and handling appeals. In this video series, I'm going to focus on building timelines not just for preparation, which is often the primary purpose of the timeline, but for actual use in the courtroom. You can think of this as an optional level up for advanced users. This first video will provide an overview of the reason and general strategy behind using a timeline for trial. We'll also get into the basics of curating a trial timeline from your master timeline, and I'll follow it up with instructional videos that get pretty granular on specific techniques such as using timelines in argument, cross-examination, and other phases of trial. In this video, I'm going to cover three things. One, what a good case timeline should accomplish, which is really good to keep in mind when you're building it. Two, why good chronology leads to success in trial. And three, how a good timeline evolves from client intake all the way to trial. This is where we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how to curate and create a trial timeline from the master timeline. As always, if you want to skip ahead to a section, just scrub to that minute and second mark. Okay, let's talk about what a good timeline should accomplish. A good case timeline is a structured, time-ordered narrative of the legally relevant events in a case, along with the documents and other evidence that support that narrative. A really good timeline does at least three things. One, it links events to the documents and evidence that support the case. As the timeline is being developed, documents are attached to events and relevant portions are cited so they can be accessed quickly. Two, it links events to the witnesses that can speak about the event. And three, it links events to relevant pleadings and court actions. A good timeline also allows any user, be it a lawyer, paralegal, or anyone else, to access this information quickly and intuitively. If I'm a paralegal and a client calls with a question about discovery, I should be able to pull up the history quickly. If I'm a lawyer examining a witness, I should be able to quickly see every event they talk about. This is critical for preparation, but if you choose to use it at trial, it's incredibly helpful. At trial, a good case timeline helps you efficiently provide the court a coherent story rather than forcing the judge to assemble it from scattered fragments and exhibits. So why is a clear, systematic, and visual focus on chronology important? Well, we all know family law courts are overwhelmed with information. At CLE events, we have panels of judges speak. Wherever you're listening from, you likely have this as well. Almost every judge I speak with or see at these events consistently complains about being confused about the history of cases even after days of evidence. They have a mountain of exhibits on their desk or stuffed in the online box. They know each side thinks the other side is terrible. They have a decent sense of the allegations each side is making against the other, but what they don't have as the person who's trying to weigh both of these competing viewpoints is a coherent chronological timeline. They ask us over and over again to slow down, to use visuals, to use timelines. What judges are asking for and what they need is context. A chronology provides that context. A common mistake is thinking the timeline must be built right before trial. You can certainly do this, and a lot of users do and will, but ideally a timeline evolves from the beginning of a case. I'll show you how we do that. At intake, the timeline is broad and imperfect. It captures current pleadings. I just drag and drop these right away, even before the first consult. It captures major life events, relationship milestones, separation dates, and initial disputes. Accuracy matters, but completeness is secondary. During discovery, the chronology becomes more detailed. Documents are added to support events along with citations to specific parts of the documents. As hearings or trial approaches, you hopefully don't even have to build a timeline because it's already there, which makes preparing for the hearing so much smoother, and we end up focusing far more on the finer aspects of preparation than running around trying to gather evidence. When I'm really curating the specific timeline I want to bring to trial or even display for the court, here's what I do. First, I click on the title of each event I want to use in the hearing or trial. You'll see to the left that these events have a check mark next to them. I check all the relevant pleadings. I check all relevant events with attached documents. When I've got what I need, I click these three dots to the upper right, I select Edit Labels, and I create a custom label for the hearing. I then create a custom filter for the hearing so that I have it at the ready. Now, when I go to the hearing, I select my preset hearing timeline, and I have only the events I want to use for that hearing. But I can also toggle back to my master timeline if I need to. I can also use the arrows right up here to move between timelines. If I need to add events to that hearing, I can do that by simply adding the hearing label to that event. Or if I need to subtract an event, I just remove the label. Now let's talk broadly about how to use the timeline at trial. You have several choices depending on your preference. First, you can use the timeline simply as a reference tool that enhances your case preparation and supports you during trial. Think of this as the timeline staying open on a tab on your laptop so you can check dates and documents, or better yet, side by side with your general argument and examination outline. This way, as you go, you can review procedural documents in response to the court's questions or review evidence while examining witnesses. Your second choice is to take it a step further and use the timeline as a visual tool for the court when arguing and presenting the case. This is totally optional, but I do this in a few ways. One, I use the presentation mode for documents so that I can present documents on screens in the courtroom without anyone seeing my timeline or my notes. Or two, I often use the timeline itself on the screens in the courtroom while arguing the case, explaining to the court the history of the case and giving the court a preview of what documents and evidence there will be to support my position. When I'm presenting exhibits that are, of course, attached to the events, I put the timeline itself up on the screen so that the court is visually reminded of where we are in place and time. And I bring the documents up from there. I'll be putting out videos on both these techniques so that you can see exactly how this is done. Post-trial, I can export the timeline into an Excel file for the timeline and a zip file for the documents, and I can send that to the court. Now the court can view the timeline on their own and can bring up the exhibits as they review. A lot of our judges like to take cases under advisement, and they may not get back to them for weeks, and in some cases months. So this is an outstanding and frankly critical way of helping them recall the case, and in particular, my client's side of it. Okay, that's all for this overview video. I'll be doing more nuts and bolts dives into trial presentation and more using these timelines, and you can find those at chronodocs.com/education. And if you haven't used the product yet, please go do that and at least experiment with it. It's free and there's no sign up. You just go to app.chronodocs.com and start experimenting and building timelines.